Hi everybody, it's Franny, and today I've got something super fun for you. We're going to do a compare between the air-cooled, this 993, and the water-cooled, this 996 Turbo. I think it's going to be super fun. I want to start with the air-cooled, and we'll go over some of the pluses and minuses of the air-cooled. So the first one, the plus that I think is probably one of the best, is that it's a very light system. We really don't have that many parts to it. We have a large fan here that directs the airflow in through this and into a bit of plastic ducting back here. And that's about it. That's about the total amount of weight on this system. So one of the nice things, in addition to that, is this is also the alternator on the car. So we have less complexity with a system like this because the fan is also sitting on the alternator, so one belt does it all, and you really can't drive the car without cooling or electricity. So if this one belt does go, you probably shouldn't drive the car anyways. So that's not a downside at all. It also allows the engine to have a little lower center of mass, I would say. You don't have all this water flowing around it. We don't have water tanks, and we don't have all this water inside the engine. So it just reduces the weight dramatically, I think, on the car. So one bit of a downside, I suppose, would be is that it is a little bit difficult to direct the air properly over the cylinders. You have to be careful of that. And since we don't have any water inside circulating around to move the temperature or to move the heat around inside the engine, that has to be done by the oil. So one of the downsides possibly is that the oil in an air-cooled car has double duty. It has to not only lubricate the engine, which is obviously its primary function, but it's also to cool and transfer heat around. So these engines will always have large oil coolers on them as well, just to try and, because that's the only way to get the heat moved around inside the engine, because all we can really cool with this air-cooled would be the cylinders via the air-cooled fins on them. So that coupled with its low complexity, I think makes it a nice system. One of the downsides, though, is the heating systems on the cars. So on a water-cooled car, since you can move the heat around, it's easy to get it into the cabin. On an air-cooled car, no, not so much. So where do you get your heat from? On the 356, it comes from the actual air that's being blown over the cylinders to cool it. They go into air boxes. You close the back of the air boxes, and that can send the air forward and into the cabin to heat it. On a car like this, on the 993s all the way back through the Carreras, the 3.2 Carreras, and all the way back through all the 911s, they're using a shroud over the exhaust manifold, and then they're blowing air through that shroud. That's a la Volkswagen, actually. The Volkswagen Beetles do it the same way. It causes, you have to start with air that's very close to the engine bay, so you can get some kind of weird funky smells inside the car, and it's just maybe not as easy to control as well. So that's maybe a bit of a downside, I guess. Another limiting factor on this is the amount of cooling an air-cooled car can actually produce. So air does not have near the capacity for heat that water does. Now, I know with a liquid-cooled car, we've got to eventually exchange all that heat through the radiator anyways, but water has over 3,000 times the ability to transfer heat due to its density, and also because just water has a higher specific heat than air does. So because of that, the air, we have to flow a lot of air on one of these engines in order to cool them. And if in a very high horsepower situation, this particular car doesn't have all that much power, but the 993 Turbo S was pushing past 400. That's a lot of power because automobile engines aren't that efficient, so they have to dissipate a lot of additional heat. Singer is they can get close to 500 horsepower out of an air-cooled engine. But still, I think you're running into a sort of a theoretical limit as to how much heat you can actually dissipate through the air. So another problem, so this is the 993, which was the end of the air-cooled reign. And one of the big reasons, there were two real reasons why Porsche had to switch over to liquid-cooled engines, one of which was noise. And most people don't really think about that, but these fans do make a decent amount of noise, and they've got curved blades on them, on the 993 at least, to reduce that noise a bit. So that does help a bit with the whooshy noise of the fan itself here. But additionally, a water jacket around the engine can actually reduce the amount of noise in an engine by just soaking up that extra vibration through it. And since we don't have that, it's just a noisier engine. So Europe and the United States had noise regulations that Porsche was having trouble meeting. The other problem was because this system is really dependent on how fast the engine speeds, so the spins. So the faster the engine, the more spin, the more cooling. The slower, the less cooling. Well, that's pretty hard to deal with emissions and getting the car to run just right, because you can't always guarantee that the temperature is going to be exactly where it needs to be. Porsche worked quite a bit to adjust the oil flows through the coolers and whatnot in order to keep it, try to keep that temperature as constant as possible and get it up as fast as possible. But, you know, it's very difficult to do in one of these cars. And the 356, for instance, is very hard in the winter to get the temperature up at all. Even the 3.2 Carrera is difficult. So that was one of the big problems. So Porsche really didn't want to get rid of the air-cooled. It's a traditional thing, and they really love it. It's nice, it's light, it's efficient, it works well, yet they had to. They didn't really have a choice. So from this 993, they went on to the 996, and let's go take a look at that. So at the back of the 996, it's a much different view back here. Now this engine is a little different than the usual 996s. This is a turbo engine, which is a Metzger engine, but still, where's the fan? There is no fan. This is the intake manifold here coming out of the intercoolers and such, and this is our air box back here. Oil filter here and different things back here, but we don't see much of the cooling system at all. Actually, there is a water pump down on this car, and this car has water lines all over it. So the water lines are actually down here. The water pump, the line comes out of the water pump here and goes up here. Now, one of the problems, or one of the things I would say about a water-cooled car, is the vulnerability of all the different hoses and things. This is a much more complex system. Now, it does allow for a lot more variability in the engine. It can control the temperature much more tightly, which is great. But at the cost of that, you've got a water pump, you've got thermostats, you've got, or at least a thermostat, and you've got these hoses that go all over the place. Now, for a rear-engined car like this, we can't put the radiators back here. They have to be all the way up in the front. So there have to be cooling lines that on all the way up to the front for this car. And that's a lot of vulnerability, a lot of hoses. And in fact, in this car particularly, we did have a hose go on us, and it was kind of a pain, and we've had problems with the radiators as well. So it's more complex. But what it allows you is the ability to control the temperature really, really solidly in the engine, which can really help to keep the emissions solid and keep them down where they need to be. You've got much more ability to get heat into the cabin and control that really well. So your creature controls work much better than some of the air-cooled cars do. But it also, in addition to that, this is a 450 horsepower engine, so it doesn't have any problem dissipating its heat because it can pump it all the way up forward to the radiators. There's fans on each one of the two radiators on each side, and there's even a third radiator across the front. So you can build out the cooling system really easily for whatever power the engine's going to deliver. So it's obviously all modern cars are now liquid cooled, and these are some of the reasons why. It's just for controllability and scalability a lot. But it does, I'm sorry, it does kind of lack a little bit of the character and the fuss that goes on with air-cooled engines. But enough of this fuss about these things. Let's go ahead and listen to the two engines. They're quite a bit different. One of the best features, I think, of an air-cooled engine is actually the sound. They sound very different than liquid-cooled engines because they don't have all that water jacket, and they've got this wonderful fan. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this thing as it runs. So at low speeds, it doesn't sound all that different, but let's rev it up a little bit, just a little, and just hear some of that fan. Isn't that neat? It's a very distinctive sound. So it's very different. It's very different than a liquid-cooled car in so many different ways. It sounds different. It acts differently. It just has a lot of interesting quirks about it. And now at the back of the 996, let's go ahead and hear what this engine sounds like as it's running. Yeah, so that's quite a bit different, isn't it? It's just very smooth sounding and much less clatter. It just has a very even sound to it. You don't hear much in the way of machinery. Now, we're not talking about exhaust sound here. This is just the actual engine noise. So you can listen to it for a second. See, that's just kind of just normal noise, normal engine noise, nothing really spectacular. So I would say with these liquid-cooled engines, they just lack a bit of drama for the engine. That's really all it is. It's not that big a deal. The liquid cooling system is a better way to actually transfer the heat out of the engine. You can pipe it to different parts of the car. It's more scalable. Now, it does come with complexity, so we have to worry about hoses, and we have to worry about thermostats and water pumps and radiators and all that fuss. And if this thing drops all of its coolant somewhere, well, you got to fill it back up with a very special and fairly expensive coolant, especially on this engine. So, I mean, there are pluses and minuses to them, and I understand why Porsche did it to get the emissions and the sound regs to where they needed to be, but for me personally, it lacks a bit of kind of old school drama, but provides a lot of other benefits. I really like the heat in the car, so that's pretty good too. So that's, I guess that's kind of the conclusion of the air-cooled and the water-cooled. Well, I hope you enjoyed the pros and cons of the air-cooled versus the water-cooled cars. What do you think? Are you guys fans of the air-cooled cars, or do you like the later water-cooled cars? Leave your comments down below and I'll get right to them. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, safe travels. Bye.